Okay, so get this, we're going deep today into some, I gotta say, brand new territory for me. We're talking about the teachings of Shiv Baba.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff, actually. Lots of vivid, imagery and some seriously unique spiritual ideas packed in here. This discourse, the one we're tackling today, it's almost like a crash course in a totally different way of thinking about life, death, the whole shebang.
No kidding. His
Yeah.
transcript, it's translated from Hindi, by the way. It's a lot. So maybe before we really jump in, could you give us a little background? Like, who is Shiv Baba? He keeps getting called father throughout, but there's never like a formal introduction.
Oh, for sure. And you know what? That's actually a really important detail to pick up on. It kind of tells us right away that these teachings, they weren't meant for total newbies. This is for followers who are already in the know, familiar with the core stuff. But based on what we are hearing, especially the language, stuff common in Hindu traditions, Shiv Baba is probably referring to the supreme being, the source of all knowledge, all purity, that whole deal.
Okay, so it's like we're tuning into a conversation that's already in full swing.
Exactly.
Interesting. And speaking of the conversation, the thing that really jumped out at me was how much it emphasizes like personal transformation. This whole idea of going from sorrow to happiness and purity to like this state of purity. It's everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just a one-time makeover. What's really interesting here is how this transformation idea, it's all tied to this cyclical view of history. That's another big theme here.
Right, like repeating ages, right?
Yeah.
Golden age where everything's virtuous and happy, and then bam, Iron Age sounds familiar, all about the suffering and vice, I guess you could say.
And through it all, this is key souls are being reborn, right? They cycle through these ages, always striving for that ultimate, transformation.
Cosmic dance-off, huh?
Yeah, kind of. And the steps are these virtues that Shiv Baba keeps hammering home. Tolerance, generosity, purity. He even goes so far as to say, those who are virtuous never cause anyone sorrow. These qualities, they're not just about being a good person. They're like the pathway to breaking free from this whole cycle of suffering we're talking about.
Okay, I'm listening. I'm listening. So how do we break free then? Detachment seems to be another big thing he's pushing, yeah.
Mhm.
Identifying as souls, not bodies, and ditching all those worldly attachments. Remember that whole bit about gold being so abundant in the golden age that it basically becomes meaningless?
Oh, yeah. That's a powerful image, right? It totally flips our priorities, like our whole value system, on its head. Think about it today. Gold means wealth, status, bling. But in this golden age, it's totally irrelevant. Why? Because real wealth, the kind that matters, comes from spiritual fulfillment, not stuff.
Like he's saying, what we value now, what we think is important, it's all just a product of the time we happen to live in. Maybe, just maybe, we're chasing the wrong things, you know?
Makes you think, right?
Yeah, big time. Now, beyond these big kind of overarching themes we've been talking about, there are a few specific things, quotes and stuff in this discourse that really, I don't know, they stood out to me. I kind of want to get your take on them.
No, totally. What specifically caught your ear?
Well, for starters, there's this whole thing about using pictures in this tradition. It's not just about thinking about the ideas, right? He's talking about actually using images like visual aids to help with meditation and even this godly service we keep coming back to.
It's interesting, right? It's like they need a visual anchor to help them connect to something bigger than themselves. Which, it makes sense when you think about it. Lots of different cultures, different spiritual practices. They've always used imagery, mandalas, icons, even just sacred spaces. It's all about creating a tangible link to something divine.
It's like a bridge, right,
Yeah.
between these big abstract ideas and something you can actually wrap your head around, something concrete to focus on.
Yeah, and speaking of focus, did you catch the part where Shiv Baba talks about curfews? Yeah.
Like actual curfews.
Yeah.
And having a dedicated space, even if it's just like a tiny room, specifically for spiritual practice.
Wow, okay, I totally missed that part.
It's in there. And honestly, it's incredibly practical advice, especially given, the state of the world he's
I
describing.
like the Iron Age. It's like
Yeah.
he's saying, look, it's a mess out there. You got to build yourself a sanctuary, a place where you can shut out all the noise and chaos and just connect with your own inner light.
Exactly. And it's not just about finding a little peace and quiet in a world that feels out of control. It's about protecting that inner transformation we're talking about.
Right, like shielding those blossoming virtues.
Exactly.
Building a little greenhouse for the soul.
I like that.
And you know what else really got me thinking? That whole comparison between the Iron Age, where we are now, and the Golden Age especially, that part about gold losing all its value, blew my mind a little bit, not gonna lie. It really makes you question, our entire economic system, right? Imagine if the very things we work so hard for, the money, the status, all this stuff, what if it all just became meaningless? In this golden age Shiv Baba is describing, none of that matters because
Yeah.
people are finding fulfillment somewhere else entirely.
Yeah, it's radical. He's basically presenting a complete alternative to the way we live now. And maybe, just maybe, it's an alternative worth looking into a little closer. 'Cause he's not just describing a utopia here, right? It's a world where human potential, what we could be, it's all realized through virtue and this deep connection with the divine.
It makes you wonder, right? What if we're all chasing the wrong things? What if true happiness, the kind that lasts, comes from cultivating something inside ourselves, Those divine virtues, the things that connect us to something bigger.
So much to unpack here. And honestly, I feel like we've barely scratched the surface.
We've got to go deeper, right? There's more to this whole godly service thing, and I'm really curious about those specific practices he mentions. Like, what's the deal with using pictures? It's not just contemplation, it's like they're tools.
It's true. It's not just about thinking about these ideas in your head. They're using images as like focal points, almost like windows into something bigger.
I'm with you on that.
And it got me thinking, you see that across cultures, across different spiritual practices, right? Mandalas, icons, even just like think about sacred spaces.
Yeah.
It's all about creating a tangible connection to the divine, you know?
Mm.
Giving your mind something to latch onto.
It's that bridge again, isn't it, between the abstract and something you can actually wrap your head around. And, okay, this one I totally blanked on curfews. He talks about actual curfews as part of this.
Right.
Wild, right?
Like you need a curfew for your spiritual growth and having a dedicated space, even if it's just a tiny room, just for this.
Okay, now that I don't remember it all. I'm telling you, it's in there. And it's super practical when you think about it, especially with how he describes the state of the world.
Right, the Iron Age. We got to create our own little pockets of peace and quiet in all this chaos.
Exactly. He's basically saying, look, the world's a mess. You need a sanctuary, a place to block out all the noise and just like connect with that inner light.
Protect those blossoming virtues.
Exactly. Create a little greenhouse for your soul.
And speaking of, different ages, that comparison between where we are now, this Iron Age, and the Golden Age, that whole bit about gold becoming meaningless, whoa, talk about a mind bender.
It really throws you for a loop, doesn't it? Like, imagine our entire economic system just poof, irrelevant. In the Golden Age, it doesn't matter. People find fulfillment somewhere else, something deeper.
It's such a different way of looking at things. It's like you're saying, what if all this stuff we're working so hard for, what if it's all just a distraction? Maybe true happiness, real fulfillment, it comes from somewhere else entirely.
It really makes you think, what are we chasing after? Are we after the right things?
Right. Big questions. And you know what? I feel like we're just getting started here. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Transformation, these cycles of Golden Age, Iron Age, that whole thing, the pictures, this godly service idea. It's a lot to process.
It really is. And that's what makes these teachings so, so engaging. It's not about wrapping everything up neatly. It's about opening up those bigger questions.
Right, those questions that kind of make you hit the pause button and really think.
Exactly. Questions that can actually shift your whole perspective.
So where does that leave us? The listeners, I mean. What can we actually, take away from all of this, from this deep dive into, the world of Shiv Baba?
Well, maybe the first question is just, how do these teachings land for you personally? Do they challenge what you already believe? Do they resonate with you? Do they maybe make you a little uncomfortable? That initial reaction, that's the starting point.
Because it's all about how we actually apply this stuff, right? It's one thing to say, oh yeah, tolerance, generosity, those are great.
Yeah.
But what does that even look like in our lives, day to day?
100%. Like, how do we create those sanctuaries, those little pockets of peace and focus in a world that just never slows down? How do we actually live these virtues, not just talk about them? And that big one, that godly service piece, what does that even mean for each of us individually?
Those are big questions, man. Not the kind you just Google and get an answer,
And maybe that's the point. Maybe it's the searching, the striving that actually gets us closer to that transformation that blossoming Shiv Baba talks about. Remember, from thorns to flowers.
Maybe the journey really is the destination. So to everyone listening, keep this deep dive going. Keep exploring. Keep asking those questions and see where they lead you. We'll catch you next time.